Well, Eric, getting things kicked off here is, of course, some good rains coming to some parts that are really needing it. And it seemed like last week there was still a little bit of a low confidence on where exactly that might land. But for the most part, still getting some rain here in Iowa and a little bit down south where it's much needed. And for the most part, on temperatures too. I mean, we're still getting some nice temperatures, but as you were kind of looking for the month of August, a little bit on the milder side. So, what are we looking at here recently?
Yeah, that's the whole forecasting, cadence and trends and then our tone about it changed a lot in the last 10 days or so. There was a lot, myself included, that thought more of mid to late August was going to be hotter and also be drier. And man, it just fell apart. So you've been looking at a map that shows the next 10 days from the artificial intelligence forecast. And it was the first last week to pick up on wetter conditions here. Most of the models were wetter south, but not necessarily coming out of Nebraska, South Dakota, into Iowa, Illinois, and so on. And that forecast continues to improve, keeping most of the heat and dryness pretty far to the south of Texas and at times into the southeast. So overall, you look at this map and it's mid-August, and I'm showing you more precip in places. And so it's hard to look at this and just assume that we're going to see anything but bearish news from the weather side of this. Probability wise, again, the chances of getting over an inch of rain are relatively high here. They do extend into the eastern Great Lakes and Northeast. I am watching the Ohio River Valley pretty closely as well, and parts of the mid-south into the Delta that need to get quite a bit more rain out of this. But overall, we might have to talk more about that area later when the hurricane season gets cranking again. After watching Debbie go through the southeast last week and then up the East Coast, we're now watching what's called potential tropical cyclone number 5. So it's not yet there, but we have forecast that it will. It's going to go over the Lesser Antilles. But then because the Bermuda High is way out here and there's a trough of low pressure come through the Great Lakes, there's not really a strong chance that this is going to hit the United States. So that leaves us with the temperature pattern. And in mid-August, to see blues on our map representing cooler than average conditions while the heat stays into Texas and maybe across parts of the South, that's not a strong signal for major stresses on the crops. In fact, I was talking to some growers and they're like, hey, can we just get a little heat I just want a little heat, finish this thing up. And I'm like, well, not for the next several days. We got cooler weather in this area. But down in Texas, where we're expecting several days of 100-degree heat, the evaporation rates down here will be getting up above, in some places, to 2.5, 3 inches of evaporation if there's water to evaporate. So back to your point when you started, where are the rains this morning? Well, take a look at this radar animation. They came out of Nebraska. They're now into Missouri, Oklahoma, Iowa. And if you kind of look where that rain's moving through, let's kind of just find this corridor. Over the last 30 days, that has been a spot that's been very dry. Zooming in on the South Central Plains, just take a look at where those rains are now this morning, hitting some places that in the last 30 days have seen about a fifth of normal rainfall. A little bit farther to the north, that moisture coming into this area was critical. I mean, we needed to get this in here to fill in some of these holes and these gaps. It's not completely taking all of that risk out, but there's still some spots in there that are really benefiting from this morning's rains. Now, I'll be honest with you, Dawson, in this part of the country, this is close to home for me. We don't I don't think the crops here need another drop. They'll finish fine without it, but man, any additional moisture I think is going to be a benefit. And just to put a number on what we've seen in the southeast, if you look at the last 30 days, and of course include Debbie, remember this area was in drought when we started July, got through mid-July, and now since then we've got a quarter in here, 300 to 400, some places up over 500% normal precip. And that was because Debbie dropped in some places up to 20 inches of rain. Now, as we think this all the way through, it's going to be a question of temperature change and precip change, like you mentioned. And so I've got some cooler air that's been anchored in place here for a while, and we see the next 10 days it stays. So this map here shows you where we've been for the last 7 days, and that's not leaving anytime soon. So why? I really think it's because we watched the pressure patterns results such that we built up some higher pressure over this warm water here. It's been anchored both, here in this part of the Pacific and here in the North Atlantic. And as a result, we're suppressing a lot of the heat to the south. And as we look out there over the next 15 days, just look at North America. The pattern's doing something like this. We have questions as to whether or not this ridge will just open and flex into the Central Plains, and it might, but overall, when you have a trough in the Northwest and a trough in the Northeast, it's hard to get the jet stream to get north of that to really just bring in long-lasting, sustained heat. So here's what we've got in terms of the models. Just watch these next couple of days through midweek. Look at the storms kind of cascading over the same areas in the model through Tuesday and getting into Wednesday. That's through midday Wednesday. Where the rains are not getting yet are be over here in the Ohio Valley where we do need more. So thankfully it's been cool in this area, but we're going to be hitting this region with some needed rains. And I want to see how much we can get down into the mid-south to kind of work against that drought area too. Now, that's not to ignore other spots, but I'm just trying to keep my focus on this midsection of the US. And we've got this forecast from the WPC for the next 7 days hitting that area. So let's do quick model run through. Ready? WPC. This is now the artificial intelligence 7 day. This is the artificial intelligence 10 day, which you saw at the beginning. Let's do that same thing with the NBM. That's the NBM 7 day, National Blend of Models. And here's the 10 day. And so you can just see that moisture. European model 7, European 10. You can see that after the next 7 days, we're adding a lot of that rainfall here. And then here's the GFS 7 and 10. And the net effect of this is all that we're looking at a wet corridor in through here while a hurricane is racing in this area. And as I said earlier, I don't think that hurricane's going to get close to us. Just watch us again. Lesser Antilles toward Bermuda, not hitting the US. Too much flow trying to keep this thing out rather than letting it in. So who's drier? This is the area that over the next 10 days has the highest chance of staying under 1/10 of an inch. And that's also the same area that we're keeping most of this heat in place. Out into week 2, maybe a drier spell in the Midwest. I mean, I think the European model has it. This makes a lot of sense. You say, why? Well, there's a trough here and there's a trough there. So the airflow is coming out of the Northwest into this region. And normally when I say Northwest flow in summer, I'm talking about storms, not when it's digging into a deeper trough like you have over here. So that's week 2. Quick on temperatures, watch this. Look at the heat in Texas and the coolness in the Midwest, the coolness along the coast, the coolest in the Northeast. That is today, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Look at this. Friday, Saturday. So, I mean, we're now to the 18th, and I'll just pick my home, 81 degrees, mid-August. And the models are saying that day 5 through 10 is cooler here, warmer in the Continental Divide, Western Plains, and maybe out there toward the end of August, we'll get the pattern to do this and a little bit of heat opening up in this area. But remember, late August to be 5, 6, 7 degrees warmer than average is not the same as saying mid-July. So this is taking us, this isn't like taking us to 105 degrees here. It's taken us into the 90s in this area. And the European model sees the same thing. That's day 5 through 10, and that's day 10 through 15. So Dawson, that's my next couple of weeks. And I think there were some important trends over the weekend that were not necessarily on the aggressive side to push this crop in a negative direction. I think it was more on the positive side.
Yeah, and talking to a few farmers, that kind of seems to be what they're seeing, especially if you look in Illinois, Indiana. A guy in Indiana, he said his crop is looking really great. He planted it earlier this spring. He was expecting something bad to happen, never came. He said he doesn't need the rain, but if he got a little bit more rain, he's going to have pods the size of gumballs for his soybeans. So with that continuing, how is that looking for the longer range and maybe getting some potential rains in some of these areas, or even down south, because they're looking like they need a little bit of a pattern change to help get some rain, especially with Texas. I mean, the USDA says the cotton crop down in Texas is looking fairly good, but could be much better. What are they needing here?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky part of the cotton belt forecast, especially going forward because of where we are in the hurricane season. And I'm going to tell you something, the Climate Prediction Center at several times throughout the summer has, I don't know what they're doing, but they've done a better job than I have at times in the subseasonal forecast. That's like week 3, week 4, and beyond. And this is their new week 3, week 4 outlook. And I look at this and I'm like, okay, I see where they're going. I'd make one adjustment. I think this dryness is further down here. And I actually would clip this off saying that I think better rains could get back into that. They have every time we've predicted drier for the upper Midwest or for the Western Corn Belt or for the Great Lakes, it's come in wetter. And I think they know that too, but I think we're just pulling on here the risk of there being, troughs along the coast. So one there and one there. So in the middle, you tend to get ridging and a little warmer and a little drier. But just a reminder, warmth at the end of August, beginning of September is just not the same as midsummer heat. So we just need to understand that that difference is going out there. But the European model says something similar, says it's going to be driest here. But I'm going to tell you, there's no way we can predict this all the way out to mid-September. That's what we're looking at. And that is because the Gulf of Mexico at any time could be developing systems that roll into this area. And I'll just tell you, I'm watching this. This is called the Hofmuller diagram. This is today going all the way through the 27th. And you see these kind of bluish colors here. When they slide, so from this side of the Indian Ocean to here, so this is a top-down view, this is a time view. Every time we get the MJO and hurricane season to get in phase 4-5, what ends up happening is this suppressing wave leaves and the lid comes off the Atlantic, and we tend to get a lot of activity. So my point is to tell you, I'd be watching carefully after the 23rd, 24th, 25th, the end of the month, for tropical systems to really start to fire up. And I'll just put it to you this way. Africa's sending the waves. They're there. They're coming out. There's no shortage of that, coming out here at all. The thing that we have to think about is the Bermuda High going to live in this area? If it does, or if it flexes a little bit farther to the west, if we get a trough in the Northwest United States, so in other words, trough here, Bermuda High moves to the west, this will take these systems, instead of leaving them out to open ocean, push them into the southeast, into the Gulf of Mexico. And all of that is still a possibility. Now, the map I'm drawing over for you, of course, is the next 10 days globally. So we're just kind of getting a snapshot of what's going on globally over the next 10 days. And that kind of brings me, I think, to my last point for you today, Dawson, and that is going to be South America, because we did get some cooler weather into Argentina or down here, but it's quite warm over the next 10 days for a lot of Brazil. And the newest long range forecast, getting us all up to September 21, is suggesting that the big subtropical high that lives here, okay, which normally, if everything was working well, would dump the moisture in and around it, it's sending more of its flow like that. See this? And as a result, we're not getting some early onset monsoonal rains, which means we could see some planting delays. Now that's early planting. This isn't going to be much of a story. If I were talking about this and it was mid-October, then we've got something to think about. And there is the potential for that, but we're not there yet. This is early September. Planting progress that's early there doesn't matter as much as what we get in October. So just want to make sure that no one kind of misreads my comments about South America at this point. Normally the front half of September is the very end of their dry season, and that's what you're looking at here.
But they're going to be banking on that monsoonal wet season coming through too, aren't they? Because they're sitting on a little bit of a soil moisture deficit, if I can remember correctly from our previous conversations, that their dry season kept going a little bit longer, their wet season cut off a little bit earlier than expected.
Yeah, they are, and they're concerned. In fact, let's go look at this. I pulled this up here. I'm going to choose season 2, which would be October, November, December. So this is the new NMME forecast for October, November, December. We kind of chatted about this for North America, where we're saying, looks drier south and wetter across the northern tier to start our fall. Most models are late on bringing in that moisture into northern and central Brazil. So they're looking at that and they're concerned. And again, this is a direct product of La Nina. But I'm going to tell you something. I think we looked at it earlier here. This La Nina is, it's failing to launch, if that's the right term. We currently have a Southern Oscillation Index that's -10. It would need to be 7 or above to be calling it La Nina. And we keep seeing little cool tendrils of water, and there's plenty of cold water to upwell here, but you got to get a strong trade wind to make that occur, and it's just not showing up. But if that does happen, that tends to give us a drier southern tier of the United States in fall and winter, very wet Northwest, wet Ohio River Valley, and it tends to produce drought issues in southern Brazil and Argentina, while we tend to be wetter in this part of Brazil. Now, if that plays out, and you have your increase of acreage, then we would not necessarily be looking at major stresses in South America at this point. But all of that is still so far ahead. That's like me telling you in February what I think the North American growing season is going to look like. We're just not there. We're not into it yet. We need more time and evidence to see how the patterns are going to shake down. But this is what history would tell me.
Right, and we're going to keep watching those trends moving forward here, especially for South America coming up with their planting season and as we finish out this U.S. crop. But again, for this week, always appreciate your insights, Eric.
Good to talk to you.